Election officials had already arrived at Katalizon in Wandegia, where voters and candidates had also assembled in preparation for the exercise. The polling station was officially designated as a voting centre before officials conducted the mandatory voter roll call. One by one, registered voters were called and proceeded to stand behind the candidates of their choice in line with Uganda's village election voting procedure. However, midway through the roll call, NRM candidate Rehema Chinabi challenged the participation of several people who had already lined up to vote, arguing that they were not known residents of the area. She demanded that election officials verify the voter register before the exercise could proceed. These complaints prompted Kampala RCC Haji Umar Rule to temporarily suspend the election and order a fresh verification of the voters' register. The situation also forced police officers to intervene and restore order after tension began escalating. Security personnel first removed non-voters, particularly men, from the polling area to allow the exercise to continue peacefully. Although the election resumed, Rehema remained dissatisfied after election officials confirmed that everyone whose name had been called appeared on the official voters' register. Moments later, she abandoned the voting process midway through the exercise, an action that contravenes the electoral guidelines governing the elections. Voting stretched until midday as officials continued reading out the voters' register. Throughout the process, nearly every voter lined up behind independent candidate Harriet Nambiru, who consistently attracted queues almost 3 times longer than those of her rivals. When the final tally was announced, Nambiru secured a landslide victory of more than 270 votes, comfortably defeating 4 opponents, including NUP's Jalia Nachigozi, who managed just 5 votes. Both Nambiru and Nachigozi criticized the earlier attempts to disrupt the election despite voters having already demonstrated a clear preference for their candidate. Meanwhile, at Remand, a village in Shariako, the voting exercise was equally tense despite the relatively low voter turnout among women. Election officials carefully cordoned off the polling area before the voting process began. However, candidates and voters also questioned the eligibility of some people who had turned up to vote, insisting that they were unknown in the village and demanded another verification of the voters' register. The situation prompted both the military and police to deploy to the area to maintain order before the election resumed. Officials continued calling out voters one by one before they lined up behind their preferred candidates, after which the votes were counted and winners declared.
At the start it was vague. I feared, but later on I became happy because people were behind me.
There is a problem of deleting people from the register.
Overall, Kampala Regional Elections Officer Jennifer Choutunji described as peaceful the overall elections process in Kampala.
We've gotten a few complaints here and there of the people who are not in the registers and they want to participate. But the law is very clear and we follow the law. If you don't come to register at the time of registration and if you're not in the register, there is no way you can participate.
Now let's move on to the West, where women across Mbarara turned up in large numbers to vote in the Women's Council elections, demonstrating a strong determination to shape local leadership despite widespread allegations of voter rigging and administrative disputes over voter identification. While polling proceeded smoothly in several areas, tensions flared over voting guidelines. Candidates in multiple polling centres raised concerns over potential vote manipulation and demanded that voters present national identification cards before lining up to vote.
At several polling stations in Mbarara City, voters were ready by 9 a.m. At Kachika Cell, names started to be read as voters entered the gate. Here, voting started at 11:20 a.m. and by midday, they were done. According to polling officials, the election registered a high voter turnout with calm process of the election.
Today the turnout was good. We had 80 voters who came and were present. Some of the people delayed. It started around 11. So we had that, but they came all at once. That helped us to finish in time.
However, a standoff escalated in Rwebihuru Cell, where voting was delayed until 2 p.m. due to a dispute raised by the National Resistance Movement NRM candidate Birungi Peace.
Let them bring IDs. We check whether they are the ones who are in that register.
Birungi insisted that voters present national IDs to prove their identity. This demand directly contradicted the Electoral Commission guidelines, which stipulate that any verified resident known to the community and listed on the village register is eligible to vote regardless of whether they hold a national ID.
They baptized some people. They gave them those names of those people who shifted. They brought them here. They are going to vote. I'm not going to relate that.
The prolonged argument in Rwebihuru necessitated heavy deployment of security personnel to maintain order, restore peace, and allow polling process to eventually commence.
But I heard people alleging that maybe they were the names were not corresponding with the new numbers. But we have tried to establish, but we have really failed. But in other polling stations, the exercise is done already. But this one here, it is always these problems.
Despite the procedural hiccups and heated debates, the process concluded with a message of unity. Newly elected leaders across most villages pledged to put political rivalries aside and collaborate closely with defeated contestants and all community members.
Well, I got to hand it over to Connery, where we have to look at the Uganda shilling. The numbers are going higher and higher just slightly. I'm looking forward to the updates that you have for us, Connery.
The dollar has gone up from 3,620, and now as we speak today, it is standing at 3,720 Ugandan shillings, that is per dollar. It means that we've seen a drop from that 3,620 to 3,720. That's a whole 100 shillings, and that could mean quite a lot. But this is all data coming in from the Bank of Uganda. Now let's look at why is the dollar rising. Number one, we have supply. And the supply, which means that the US level, back to the supply, it means that the number of dollars in the country are quite low, and therefore the dollar has to go up. But also, why is that? Fewer dollars entering into the country, because perhaps this could be one of the reasons. US level 4 of the travel advisory that has, of course, put Uganda to sort of between a rock and a hard place. So therefore, that has gone into fewer international travelers as opposed to what the situation was before, and then lower tourism earnings, and has also been about reduced business travel and investment inflows, and therefore you have few dollars in the country. But also Uganda still needs some dollars because we need fuel imports, and also we have to import in some medicine, machinery, industry equipment, airline payments, international obligations. Now all these do require some dollars, and therefore it is quite much needed, but the dollar is still quite up. Now the travel advisory, let's do some connection here. How does the travel advisory from the United States do connect to the dollar rising? Number one, it has of course led to fewer tourists and business visitors, fewer tourism dollars enter into the economy. It might look as such a small thing, but it's quite a big deal. Then you also have reduced foreign exchange inflows, those that would have been here, with the dollars are not here, or those that would have been here are now quite fewer. And then you also have pressure on the dollar market. Now, let's also now try to understand more to that. You have shilling weakening because of the few dollars on the market and the pressure on the dollar market. Now, why do we have to advocate for the dollars to be here? Because the tourism dollars do matter to the hotels and lodges, to the transportation, to the restaurants. You might have been to 5